Usually I try and avoid talking about pitches because it's boring. But this pitch was not boring. It was a lot of things, but not that. The BCCI don't release the figures for how much the ball spins or doesn't from their home test, not even to CricViz. So we're in the dark a little. But from my standpoint, this pitch didn't turn as much as the second test in Chennai. It also didn't explode in the first over. But there are also some other big differences. When the ball got soft at Chennai, you could still bat. It still spun, but slower, and players made runs. And there were 5 Indian batters and 1 from England who actually did that. And you could also forgive Chennai for back-to-back games, same ground, baking hot sun, etc. Plus it has a history for spinning. But as I said in a previous video, I wouldn't take that Chennai pitch home to meet my mum. And well, this pitch, well, I wouldn't even tell my mates about this one. That doesn't mean it wasn't fun. It was hella fun. But we had 2 batters past 50 in this match. Crawley made most of his runs against seam early on, and Rohit looked as subdued as Rohit can look. When it comes to looking at pitches, I have the Michael Clark rule, which briefly summed up means if a part-timer ends up with unnatural figures outside of the 4th innings, then something has gone wrong with the bat, the ball, or the pitch. And maybe in special situations, all 3? It's hard to look at the fact that India were bowled out for 145 by Jack Leach and Joe Root on the second day and not think, maybe this is not for us. And the test went for 2 days. That does happen. Since 2000, we've had a few tests inside that time. But usually what happens is one team is completely dominating and they're just trying to rush through the game. That wasn't the case here. Both teams were struggling at times and everyone was rushing through the game unintentionally. We haven't had a 2-day test on a pitch like this millennia. This is the shortest completed test match since the Second World War, 830 balls. And it's bad, like no curator would be happy with this. But it wasn't dangerous, and not that many of the wickets were unplayable either. But because this is me, let's look at a few different factors here. And no, we're not going to look at the fact that England chose 3 seamers and 1 frontline spinner, even though it is, undeniably, funny. Let's start with the other funny thing, that so many wickets on this raging turner came from straight balls, because this is always fascinating. And before some even bigger nerd than me comes into the comments and, actuallys over certain balls, I've basically looked at balls that more or less went pretty much straight. I didn't use a protractor, and some went dead straight, and others were straightish. And with the tail, I didn't pay that much attention. In the first innings of this test, England lost 5 wickets to straight balls from spinners. And that is not including the straight ball that Dom Sibley went out to, which happened to be from a seamer. But it was quite clear early on, and by early on I mean the moment Axar Patel came on, that the ball was skidding straight and that the players were having trouble with it. But this was not an England problem. India lost 4 of their top order to straight balls, and there's some pretty good players here. You don't really expect Pujara to struggle with the straight ball early on in a test from a spinner in India. So this was clearly a thing for India as well, even if it was just their top order. While most of the other spinners were getting their wickets with straight balls, it was Joe Root who actually seemed to get all of his with spin, which is why so many of the left-handers went out to him. Okay, this is a lot of straight. This is like more straight than John Wayne. Not that I know what John Wayne actually did in his private time, of course. I might be being slightly unfair on Crawley here, but again, put away your protractor, I don't care. But my memory of this is that the England batsmen continually went out to the straight ball here. This is what we call in, every part of life, a pattern. That's a lot of wickets to straight balls in 3 innings. Now there are a few factors to this, but the first one is why we don't have anyone nicknamed Jimmy Paddams anymore. For those who don't know, Jimmy Adams was a West Indian batsman in the 90s who was a fine player, but he was a very, very good player against spin, and he used his pads a lot, hence the Paddams. When he went to India in 1994, from 3 tests, he made 520 runs, averaging 173. His pads made 1,000 runs and averaged 349. It was a completely different game then, and batsmen would thrust their bat and pad together as far down the wicket as they could, and they just weren't giving out LBW. If you were far enough down the pitch, the umpire didn't even think about giving you LBW. That was in 1994. And not only did we not have DRS then, we didn't even have Hawkeye. DRS really becomes a thing in around 2008 and 2009. But you can see from right here that umpires started changing how they gave LBWs to seamers and spinners well before that. They were watching the TV and they learnt two very important things. With the seam bowler, the ball generally bounces over the stumps. With the spinner, it rarely bounces over the stumps. And the way that people played spin had to change. Now, I already knew about a fair bit of this. But today when I was talking on TalkSport, and I was talking about how a lot of batsmen have a weakness when the ball spins away, which is normal, of course. Kevin Peterson, who happened to be behind me, picked up the microphone because he has this theory that it is the DRS that has changed things. Before DRS, there was a certain way that you played spin which involved your pad, and you can no longer do that once umpires start giving those decisions out LBW. CricViz were also listening in on this chat, and they offered up this, and it completely backs up Kevin Peterson's point. It's not that the LBW percentage has changed that much, but what has changed is the averages. The light green is the first decade of this millennium, and the dark green is the second decade. And in the light green section, players were handling the ball spinning away from them okay, especially left-handers. And then the second decade, it's been not too bad for right-handers, although that's quite a drop. But left-handers, it's been bad for them. It's been really, really bad. And as I said a moment ago, it's not just LBWs, it's that batters have had to change their technique. And at the moment, they haven't found one that works against the ball spinning away. And unsurprisingly, and kind of like you would always expect, most wickets went to bowlers spinning the ball away from the bat. But, and I know what you're about to say, so stop writing that comment. As I've already said, most of the bowlers in this test actually got their wickets with straight ones. So let's get to that. Because it is weird to have such a low scoring test when so few wickets actually went to unplayable balls. To really understand what was going on this wicket, we have to go to the 8th over of the 3rd innings when Ashwin was bowling around the wicket to Joe Root and Dom Sibley. It is one of the most remarkable Hawkeye displays that I have ever seen. It doesn't quite make sense, so let me just quickly take you through it. I have checked, these balls all roughly landed in the same place, on a decent length and straight. And yet, you can already see that they did not act that way. This one here turned just a little, and it kept low. This one went straight, but bounced normally. This one also went straight, but did not bounce normally. Now let's go to the other side. This one here just turned away a little, and this one turned a fair bit more and also bounced a fair bit more. And this one, well, you can't even see this one because it has left the window completely. Maybe this is a glitch in the BCCI's Hawkeye system, but I'm pretty sure I remember this happening. And I kept going back to the BCCI's Hawkeye to see if this was a mistake, but they kept showing it. It's this kind of over that makes you miss the straight one. It is hard to edge one of these balls. It's hard to get near some of these balls. And when you are looking for balls that are keeping low or turning sideways or bouncing high, that is when the straight one gets you. But even then, you wouldn't expect that many straight ones to take that many wickets. So something else must have happened. After the game when Joe Root was talking to TalkSport, he talked about this, that the pink ball just skidded through. And it's something that everyone watching this test had probably thought about at one stage or another. It was like everyone was bowling a flipper unintentionally. Perhaps it was the extra lacquer on the ball or something to do with the pinkness, I don't know. But even when the spinners were trying to turn it, it would go straight. And I did go and check, especially Ashwin, because he's such a master on this. Quite often when he wants the ball to go straight on, he bowls with a different angle with his wrist. But I looked at all the slow-mos I could find, and most of the time, even when he was trying to spin the ball sideways, if that ball hit that lacquer, it just seemed to skid straight on. We haven't seen the pink ball on a surface like this very often. Mostly there is extra grass to protect the ball, or they are really flat. This was obviously neither of those things. Now, if your default is that the batting could have been better, well, I mean, the batting could have been better. England have been struggling with spin for a while, and even India's best two players of spin, Pujara and Kohli, have not been brilliant in this series. But when you factor in the pitch, the ball, the recent record of spinning the ball away, it at least makes some sense. I mean, as much as anything in this match made any sense. So I don't really know where all this leaves us. If you came here because you thought this pitch was definitely doctored, you might still be right, but realistically, it was doctored so poorly that it gave England a chance of winning. If you came here thinking, this was a tough pitch, but you get those sometimes in India with a little bit of extra spin, that's also true, but it did behave very oddly. And if you came here thinking, well, modern batters are rubbish, well then, I understand that thinking, but I think the biggest difference here is that technology has fundamentally changed how we bat. Honestly, having looked at this, I think the whole situation was a bit of a fluke. The pink ball skidding going up against a poor wicket with DRS damage techniques. But if I was this groundsman, I'd probably delete this one from my LinkedIn profile There was inconsistent bounce on day 1, the footmarks fell apart really early, and it didn't make it to the full 2 days. No matter what the plan was for this pitch, it certainly wasn't that.